Good morning, students. 8th Standard Social History Lesson 3 Rural Life and Society. The previous lesson, Unit 2 from Trade and Territory, you have learnt about the rise of the political power of English East India Company and the events and impact of Battle of Plassey and Buxar, to know the Carnatic Wars and Mysore Wars and the Anglo-Maratha Wars, then to understand the growth of colonial army and civilian administration, then to understand the principles of subsidiary alliance and doctrine of lapse. Now, Unit 3, Rural Life and Society, you are going to learn about the people, how they led their life in the rural life and society. Learning objectives. So, to know the land revenue policy under the British rule, to understand the merits and demerits of the land revenue policy, to know the agrarian crisis and revolts. Agrarian means it is connected with farming and the use of land for farming. The பயிர் தொழில் விவசாயம் செய்கிறது. Then I will see about the introduction of the lesson. In the pre-colonial period, Indian economy was predominantly an agrarian economy. So, agriculture was a primary occupation of the people. Industries like textiles, sugar, oil dependent on it. So, the British government introduced three major land revenue and tenurial system in India. Land revenue, நிலத்திலிருந்து கிடைக்கும் வருவாய், the tax, and tenurial system, it is a money regularly received by a government. That is, tenurial system means proper order, the rights of holding a piece of agricultural land between the landowner and the farmer or farm worker. Now we'll see about the three types of land revenue system. The land revenue policy under the British, there was a three types. So, first it is a permanent settlement. It was introduced by Lord Cornwallis. The Ryotwary system, it was introduced by Thomas Munro. Then third land revenue policy under British was Mahalvari system. It was introduced by Lord William Bentinck. Let us see about the permanent settlement. When Robert Clive obtained the Diwani of Bengal, Diwani means Diwani rights were the rights granted to British East India Company to collect revenues and decide the civil cases. So, Diwani of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa in 1765. There used to be an annual settlement of land revenue. Warren Hastings changed it from annual to quinquennial, that is 5 years once, and back to annual again. During the time of Cornwallis, a 10 years decennial settlement was introduced in 1793 and it was known permanent settlement. Introduction of permanent settlement. Lord Cornwallis introduced this system in 1793. So, permanent settlements were made in Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, Varanasi division of Uttar Pradesh and northern Karnataka, which roughly covered 19% of the total land area of British India. So, it was known by the different names like Zamindari, Zagirdari, Malguzari and Bishwadari. Salient features of the permanent settlement. The Zamindars were recognized as the owners of the land as long as they paid the revenue to the East India Company regularly. Zamindars, they collect the revenue from the cultivators and they have to pay the revenue to the East India Company regularly. The Zamindars acted as the agent of the government for the collection of revenue from the cultivators. Actually, cultivators, they have to do all the cultivating work in the land and they have to pay the revenue to the Zamindars. Then Zamindars regularly they have to pay the revenue to the East India Company. The amount of revenue that the Zamindars had to pay to the company was firmly fixed and would not be raised under any circumstances. They gave 10/11 of the revenue collected by them from the cultivator to the government. The zamindars would grant bata, that is a written agreements, to the ryots, to the farmers. The ryots become tenants since they were considered the tillers of the soil. They have to do all the work in the land and farming work in the land. That's why they were considered as the tillers of the soil. So all judicial powers were taken away from the zamindars. Zamindars were supported to collect the taxes or rent from the peasants and pay it to the British company. Then the taxes or revenue to be paid to the British was fixed permanently regardless the yield of the land. The land is not held also, they have to pay the land revenue to the government. Merits of the permanent settlement. Under this system, many of the waste lands and forests became cultivable lands. The zamindars became the owner of the land. Then the zamindars were made free from the responsibility of providing justice. So the zamindars remained faithful to the British government. This system secured a fixed and stable income for the British government. Demerits of the permanent settlement. The British government had no direct contact with the cultivators. So the right of the cultivators were ignored and they were left at the mercy of the zamindars. Zamindars, they have treated cultivators very badly. The peasants were almost treated as serfs. Serf is an agricultural labor bound by feudal system who was tied to working on his lord's estate. Serfs, they have to do work in the estate, zamindar's estate only. So this system was made the zamindars lethargic and luxurious. Lethargic, lack of energy. Zamindars, they didn't have any energy. They have taken all the energy from the cultivators. They used to live in the luxurious life. Then many conflicts between the zamindars and the peasants arose in rural Bengal. Next land revenue policy under the British was Ryotwari system. Ryotwari system was introduced by Thomas Munro and Captain Reed in 1820. Major areas of introduction of Ryotwari system included Madras, Bombay, parts of Assam and Coorg provinces of British India. By Ryotwari system, the rights of ownership was handed over to the peasants. So the ownership, the land ownership was handed over to the peasants. So British government collected taxes directly from the peasants. Initially, 1/2 of the estimated produce was fixed as a rent. This assessment was reduced to 1/3 of the produce by Thomas Munro. The revenue was based on the basis of the soil and the nature of the crops. This system, this Ryotwari system is different from permanent settlement. Actually, in the permanent settlement, zamindar had to pay the taxes to the company and they were collected from the cultivators. Now in this Ryotwari system, were ownership of the land. Actually, the British government collected taxes directly from the peasants. No zamindar, no intermediate here. Direct contact between peasants and the East India Company government. And this system was introduced by Thomas Munro. Then rents would be periodically revised, generally after 20 to 30 years. The position of the cultivators became more secure. Here the position of the cultivators, the peasants, became more secure. In this system, the settlement was made between the government and the ryots. Ryots, the cultivators. So in fact, the government later claimed that the land revenue was rent and not a tax. Salient features of the Ryotwari system. Revenue settlement was done directly with the ryots. Measurements of field and an estimate of produce was calculated. Government fixed the demand at 45% to 55% of the produce. So here Railway system, direct contact with the ryots and the East India Company. Then effects of the railway settlement. In most areas, the land revenue fixed was excessive. The ryots were hardly left with bare maintenance even in the best of seasons. So under this system, the government exploited the farmers instead of zamindars. Here also, in this system, the railway settlement, the revenue fixed was, the land revenue was fixed excessive. ரொம்ப அதிகமா land revenue போட்டதுனால the ryots were hardly left with the bare maintenance of the, even in the best season. Best season also they were bare to maintenance for the land revenue. So in this system, government exploited the farmers instead of zamindars. Lord William Bentinck was introduced by this Mahalvari system. Features of the Mahalvari system developed by Holt Mackenzie in 1822. It was introduced in northern parts of India. Then fields were measured. Then revenue of each plot added up to collective revenue of villages, and revenue was revised periodically. Then village headman collected the revenue. Then village was called as Mahal. Mahalvari system, a brainchild of Holt Mackenzie, was modified version of the zamindari settlement introduced in the Ganga Valley, the northwest province, parts of central India and Punjab in 1822. Lord William Bentinck was to suggest radical changes in the Mahalvari system by the guidance of Robert Martin's Bird in 1833. Then assessment of revenue was to be made on the basis of the produce of the Mahal or village. So village, it was called as a Mahal. So all the proprietors of the Mahal were severely and jointly responsible for the payment of revenue. So the headman only responsible for the payment of revenue. Initially, the state share was fixed 2/3 of the gross produce. Bentinck therefore reduced to 50%. So the village as a whole, through its headman or Lombarded only village headman, was required to pay the revenue. This system was first adopted in Agra, Oudh, and later extended to the other parts of United Provinces. So the burden of all this heavy taxation finally fell on the cultivators. Salient features of the Mahalvari settlement. The Lombarded, that means headmen of the village, acted as intermediaries between the government and the villages. It was a village-wise assessment. One person could hold a number of villages. The village community was the owner of the village common land, and the village land belonged to the village community. Then effects of the Mahalvari settlement. The Lombarder enjoyed privileges which was misused for their self-interest. So this system brought no benefit to the cultivators. So it was a modified version of the zamindari system and benefited the upper class in villages. So all the three systems, the cultivators, they were suffered a lot. This system brought no benefit to the cultivators. Then impact of the British land revenue system on the cultivators. Here the common features of all the settlements was the assessment and the minimized income from the land. It resulted in increasing land sales and dispossession. So the peasants were overburdened with taxation due to the tax burden and famines varachi. In general, the people suffered in poverty and burdened with debts. Poverty, no food, nothing, and they were burdened with debts. Kadanaaligala aayitaanga. So they had to seek the money lenders who became rich and acquired lands from the peasants. The zamindars and moneylenders and lawyers exploited the poor peasants. So the poor peasants, they have to get money from the zamindars, moneylenders and lawyers, like a loan with the heavy interest. The stability and continuity of the Indian villages was shaken. So cottage industries disappeared on account of the import of British goods, and the peasants had nothing to supplement their income. The old body of custom was replaced by new apparatus of law, courts, fees, lawyers and formal procedures. The British policy proved advantageous only to the government of a privileged section of the society at the cost of the cultivators, who were the rightful owners of their lands and claimants of the larger share of the produce. Under the policy of the land revenue system, finally peasants, they were suffered a lot.